Alright guys, so today we're going to be talking about Rainbow Six Extraction. Alright, I've played through the game, seen what I wanted to see. I think I'm prepared to talk about it, give it a score, all that good stuff. So I did a live stream and a first impressions video if you kind of want to see my earlier thoughts, or just a full hour of gameplay. That's what some of this footage is from. And so, overall, I just want to summarize the game real quick, and then we'll get into my thoughts on it. So in case you don't know what this game is, and you just thought you might like it, or want to try it out, or saw it on Game Pass, and just wanted to know more about it, it's not exactly like the previous Rainbow Six entries in the franchise, right? It's nothing at all like Siege. While it takes a lot of the mechanics, and the gunplay, and textures, and the characters, and the lore, and the story, and all that directly from Siege, the last entry, it's completely different how it works, on the fundamental gameplay loop. So what are you going to be doing? What is the main objective in this game? What is the goal? Well, each level, that's what you want to call it, is broken down into 3 subsections. And there'll be an objective in each subsection. You can either choose to complete that objective and move on to the next one for more XP, or extract from whatever subsection you're in, whether you're in the first stage, the second stage, the third stage, and take the XP you have now. It's almost like the way Zombies is done now in Call of Duty. Over the past few entries, they've redone it to where the amount of XP you get, progresses as you go further and further, and you can choose at any point to extract and take that XP or continue to keep going, and if you do end up dying, you don't get as much XP as you would if you would have extracted. Now, where does this all fit in the Rainbow story and the lore and all of that stuff? This is more just a continuation of the event that we had a couple years back, the Outbreak event, and he references it a lot, but you don't have to have played Rainbow Six Siege to really understand what's going on here. Again, it's not really a story game. I think there's like 4, maybe 5 cutscenes throughout the whole thing, so there's not too much to know. It's more of just a fun zombie shoot 'em up. But there is story here. It does continue for those people that are in the lore of the whole Rainbow Six franchise. So I already talked about it once, but it's my favorite word. We'll bring it up. The central gameplay loop, right? What do you do? So there's 2 types of XP in this game. The reason why you're playing, right? There's individual operator XP, which is unique to each operator, right? They're level 1 through 10, increase their speed, their ability to recharge, their health, how much, incoming damage they can take, and then some unique to each operator, like Finka, for example. Whenever she goes down, she has the ability to damage an enemy and automatically get herself back up. Stuff like that that's unique to each character. So there's your individual character XP. Then from there, you have your overall XP, which is kind of laid out like a battle pass, but it's not. There's 30 tiers, and with each tier, they're called milestones that you unlock. You get something new, right? So at level X, you unlock the New York levels. At level Y, you unlock the San Francisco, and then Alaska, and then the Truth or Consequences, and then the final 2 game modes that we'll talk about later. There's also a tech tree that we'll get into in a bit. This has things like stun grenades, frags, scanner grenades, mines, glue grenades, just all your tactical stuff that's not specifically operator based. So before you go into a mission, you choose your operator, their loadout, what you want to bring, what tech, what gadgets, all of that stuff. And like I said, it's a direct continuation in a sense, more of a spin-off from the main Rainbow Six Siege franchise. Alright, so you have all of your operators, and they all have their gear, right? So Pulse has his shotgun, and has all of his guns, and Alibi has her the LMG that Maestro has, and Jaeger has his guns, and blah 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 blah. They have their gadgets, they do exactly what they do in Siege. They have the same pistols. I mean, it's all is just carried over. Now they have some extra stuff, like certain characters have guns that they definitely don't have in Siege, just to change up the variety of the gameplay within each operator. And it's definitely not insanely well balanced, but it is how it is when you're kind of porting characters over from another game into this one. That's kind of just how things are going to go, right? Because you want to see all the familiar faces from Siege, but the problem with that is that some of them are a bit less useful. For example, IQ. Just about as useful as she is in Siege. On the higher difficulties, she's really good. You can find all of these blinding spores and your objectives quicker to get through areas. But on the lower difficulties, where things aren't too hard, you don't really need her. Fuse is another good one. There's not that many examples. It's not like Siege where you know exactly what the enemy's gonna be, and you can just set up your fuse charges and take them out. That's not a thing here. The enemies are pretty much all over the map. You really have to have a specific scenario. Again, another good one doesn't work out well. Tachanka, right? He actually doesn't have his new gadget, the grenade launcher, which I think would have worked well. He has his LMG in this, and the problem with that is that the objectives rotate within each one of these 3 subzones in a mission, right? It can be like tag nest, destroy nest, capture a target, kill a target, defend a zone, anything like that. And it's completely random, and you don't know when picking your operators. So if you pick Tachanka and you get something like defend a zone, that's something that is really useful because you can just set up and hold that area. But then on a completely other objective, like for example, capture the target, where you need to be luring enemies to a certain area, Tachanka's ability is practically useless. So it really is a balancing act. Some of the more OP ones, Vigil is really good, simply just because he has the ability to turn invisible, and stealth is your friend in this game. You can take out pretty much any enemy, no matter what the difficulty is, in one hit, aside from the bosses, right? He's good. I mean, Doc and Rook are good naturally, that doesn't need to be explained. Swedge is decent. Someone like Habana, who's good in Siege, isn't the most useful here, and these aren't all of the characters. I believe there's 18. You unlock more as you progress. And so, let's talk about progression. So this is where one of my problems comes into play. So like I said, you start out with New York as your primary zone. Each zone has 3 levels set to it, right? And so the XP, the way this works, is you don't have to play every level within each zone, right? You could theoretically play the first level on New York over and over and over and over again and unlock everything in the game. Now it's going to take you much longer than doing it any other way, but you could, right? So the way it works is you have these studies, like you see here. They're challenges, like get kills with primary weapons, get kills with secondary weapons, get kills on stunned enemies. As you progress through more zones, you get more XP for each challenge, but the challenges become harder. Kill certain types of enemies while they're stunned, kill certain types of enemies through walls, etc., etc., right? And so as you go from zone to zone, you get more XP, and it requires more XP in order to unlock more things. So my problem here, the whole progression system, is you can get through this whole level, not go down once, kill all of the enemies, complete all of the objectives, take out all of the nests in every area, do everything you can do aside from your challenges, and you will not get any overall game XP, or at least meaningful overall game XP in the later stages. The only thing you will get is operator XP, which you do need, don't get me wrong. You definitely need to be a decently scaled level to what you're playing, but you don't get just overall progression. You have to do these challenges in order to progress to the next area, unlock new zones, unlock new operators, new game modes, all of that stuff. And so like I said, I talk about this a lot in my first impressions video. There's 4 zones with 3 levels in each of them, and I estimated it would be about 10 to 11 hours in each zone, depending on what difficulty you played on. And other than in the last zone where we were just significantly under leveled, we played on the hardest difficulty we had unlocked at that point throughout all of them. And it took us about 10, 11 hours to get through it all. But that's what I'm going to call the main game, is the first 4 regions, right? You have New York, San Francisco, Alaska, and Truth or Consequences. Then there's those 2 other sections that I was talking about. And so one of them is just pretty much a horde mode in a sense, where it's not so much that it's endless, but it's just significantly more difficult, right? You have still the same 3 subsections with the same objectives that are randomly generated, except there's significantly more enemies. Hordes rush you throughout the mission, but obviously you get more XP. Keeping on the same topic of progression, let's move over to the tech tree, right? So the tech tree, like everything else, is through the challenge progression, right? Aside from your operators, you unlock everything through this challenge progression. And like I said, there's things like grenades, flashbangs, claymores, glue grenades, all of that stuff. And so this tree is set up well, and it's set up like any typical tree or battle pass or skill path you'd have in a game, right? All of your crappy stuff and like the generic boring stuff's at the beginning, and the cooler stuff's at the end. The problem is that this game has a huge grind, right? So you unlock these first 4 areas relatively easily, right? I believe we got almost all of them just beating each level once, right? So like I said, there's 3 levels in each zone, and we go through and complete all 3 subsections and extract from each level, and pretty much except for the last area, we were able to do each of them once and unlock the next area, which is how progression should be. But towards the end, you get to a point where, at least in our situation, we were a good 3 whole levels below where we needed to be to unlock the next set of missions, tasks that were new and original that we hadn't done before. So there is this sense of having to repeat stuff, right? And it's not on the same level of something like Back 4 Blood, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But if you really want to unlock everything and get all of the operators and get the really cool tech things that you can get all of the game modes and fully progress everything, you're gonna have to grind. Now that's obvious with a lot of games, right? If you want to get everything, you have to grind. But the problem here is that grind is way too early. They essentially give you 6 to 8 hours, depending on what difficulty you play on, of the traditional mode with the 4 zones. Then you get a higher difficulty after you get through that. Again, not a lot of grind required for the most part. And then to unlock the final game mode, you gotta grind like crazy. And I wouldn't have a problem with this if it was at least mentioned to us what this game mode is. There's no description for this game mode. It's just a grayed out picture and unlock at milestone 18 or whatever it is. Right? So you don't even know what you're missing out on if you want to do this whole grind to it, because if it's something that you have no interest in, then you can just say, okay, like, did everything I want to do, I'm done. But you have no way of knowing what it is because there's no description. You need some kind of way to inform the player that, hey, this is what this game mode is, just a quick description, and maybe like a tutorial of what it's gonna be, and then you can decide if you want to go for that grind, right? I do think that game mode is exceptionally far spaced out from the rest of progression for a reason. It's to keep you playing. The operators and the tech tree kind of have the same problem. More the tech tree, I mean, it has the same problem where I think it's like level 18 you have to be to unlock the last level of stuff, and I finished the 4 main zones in this game around like 13, 14. So there is a lot of grind that they want you to do at the end game, which if that's your thing, that's fine. So what makes this game unique, right? Why should you play it? How is this different than like Back 4 Blood? Okay, so for the most part, on paper, this is pretty much just Back 4 Blood with the Rainbow Six skin. But what changes here, and I don't want to get this confused, there's definitely tropes and stereotypes this game uses, right? Like suicide or zombies, that's not anything new, right? But then like big guys that rush you, again, not anything new. But then there's some guys that are really cool, like the ones that spike into the ground and hold you in place. Again, not anything too original, but it's something different and it's new and it's unique, right? And yes, I'm biased because it's Rainbow Six and I like this game, like Rainbow Six Siege a lot, but it is what it is. So there's that aspect to it. There's the goo aspect to it where that constantly slows you down, that you have to figure out how to traverse through. There's nests and all of that stuff, which again, none of that is unique. But the most unique thing is when you die, right? If you die, both of you die, you use your certain amount of downs, or you just both go down and have no way of getting yourself back up, no self-revive or anything like that, you get captured in this rock candy goo looking stuff, and your operator is detained by the enemy. Now what the hell does that actually mean, right? So essentially, like I said, there's 18 operators in this game. If you're playing as, let's say, Sledge is your main, right? And you level up each individual operator. This is why I talked about progression first, right? You have that individual operator XP, right? That what decides how difficult the level is and what gear you have and skill sets you have when going into the level. So if your operator is taken and captured, you now can no longer use them and you have to use a different operator to go rescue them. Now rescuing them is something as simple as going in, and one of your objectives in the zone is to go hold X and to defend this area and shoot these spores coming out of a tree, and you just extract with that operator and you've saved them and they'll be low health. Now that's pretty much it. It's nothing insane. It is what it is. Now, from there, you have the health damage system, right? So let's say you save somebody, or you just did a mission as somebody, and you took 30 damage in this mission, let's say. you're going to be at 70 health, and you now have to complete missions either with that damaged operator or as other operators in order to refill the health of that original operator. That goes for when you save somebody from being captured, you go get them back, they're going to be insanely weak, and you have to do a couple missions in a row before you are able to get them back up to full health. So in order to go through missions with full health, you have to go ahead and main multiple operators essentially, or just not die ever. Now, speaking to that not dying ever part, this game is actually quite difficult, right? And so if you're relatively new to the channel, a lot of the content you've seen is especially the Spartan Visions, is PC content where I'm pretty much dog water, but on console, I would consider myself quite good, right? I'm not pro league level, but I'm quite good, right? And like I said, we were playing on the hardest difficulty, and this was hard. I mean, once you get into the end of the 3rd zone going into the 4th zone, you're pretty much going down at least once every level and losing operators left and right. I had to main 3 or 4 different characters in order to, not have to play as level 1 every single time. You really do have to have a handful of operators that you like, because you can't be going into level 6, 8 plus missions with level 1 operators. You just have such a disadvantage. Now, the other unique things that this game does in this kind of zombie shooter genre is it takes that Rainbow Six Siege aspects, like I said, all the mechanics and gameplay and all of that stuff, and brings it here. So you have a UV light that allows you to see through walls, the soft walls, if you're familiar with Rainbow Six Siege terminology, basically just dry wood walls. And you can just shoot the enemies straight through these walls, and it's just as satisfying as shooting somebody through walls and one-tapping enemies through walls in Rainbow Six Siege. The same thing here with the new execution system, right? Name of the game is stealth. Everything's easier if you do things stealthily. And there's a whole new range of melee animations that they made here that are all great. They're really fun and interesting to look at. It's like having a brand new Far Cry game, right? And it is made by the same people, so they probably pulled in some of the talent from that area. But it's just really good looking, solid animations, right? And so, aside from that, there's one more thing I want to talk about, right? And this is where I'm probably the most biased towards this game, and that's the boss fights. And so, like I said, I like Rainbow Six Siege a lot. I mean, I have over probably 1,500 hours. Like, I've played almost every season until up to recently. So, I like this game a lot, okay? So in Extraction, I was already overhyped and biased for it, just because it was Rainbow Six, right? But the boss fights here are so cool, because it takes something that they didn't have to do, right? They had no reason to do it, but they did it anyways, and it's really cool. So, if you haven't figured it out already, there are boss fights that are like the big enemies that charge at you, and enemies that have projectiles and stuff like that. But then there's these really tough boss fights with health bars, right? And in my playtime through the game, I believe I ran into 4. Right, and each one is an operator from the game with their own unique sets of abilities, right? So here you're seeing Smoke, which he has a shotgun and runs around and leaves a smoke trail behind him that damages you when you go in it, wherever he goes, right? There was a sledge fight that we did where he charges at you. I mean, he's basically just a big brute, has a hammer, can do ground pounds and all of that stuff. There's an alibi boss fight where she splits obviously into multiple targets, and you have to figure out which one's the real one. And so obviously all of this really fun stuff, right? Because it takes all of your knowledge of the operators in the game and just combines them together with the fun game mechanics of Rainbow Six. And so the only problem I have with these boss fights is that they're not, stage ending or level ending events that you run into. They're randomly generated events, just like all of the other ones in the game. So, like the destroying the nests, or capturing an enemy, or defeating an elite, or tagging nests, all these things I talked about earlier, all these random game modes that you can get in each subsection. These boss fights are just one of those. So it is completely random if you get one of these fights or not. Like I said, in my entire playthrough of the game, I think I got 4 of them. And so that part of it kind of sucks. I wish they were more constant, and not so much the operator that you're fighting, but just the just having a boss fight at the end of a stage, or a whole section within each stage that is a boss fight, would just have made this more fun. Now, I did get the alibi boss fight twice, so I don't know if it's only these 3 bosses in the game right now, or if every single one of the 18 operators has their own boss fight. I can't imagine that's the case, because I don't know what you do with something like Jaeger for a boss fight. I guess you could just have them throw ACOGs at you and cry, but that's pretty much it. But that's pretty much the summarization of the whole game. I mean, the only thing I didn't really touch on is the store, which I talked about in my first impressions video. There is a store. The skins are like $10. It is what it is. Everything's gonna have a store at this point. And the other thing I didn't talk about was the just the skins and all of that stuff. I mean, that's part of the progression. You unlock uniforms and outfits and all of that. But again, I didn't think it was necessary enough to really dive into, right? So let's go ahead and give this game a score and go over kind of my final thoughts on it. So Rainbow Six Extraction pretty much just takes what every other zombie shooter does and just does it a little bit better with that big AAA money and that franchise name, right? Things like Back 4 Blood, World War Z, all those types of games, and it really just takes what those do well, takes what they don't do well, combines them, and puts its own Rainbow Six spin on it, right? So that's pretty much how I would choose to summarize this game. Now, when you rate a game, you have to take into account the overall price, right? And so this game, like I say, with every Game Pass game that I review, I give 2 scores. There's a $40 price point if you don't buy this through Game Pass, which I think is just over the limit of what it's worth. I think this is worth $30 if you go through and unlock all the 4 regions, and maybe unlock like the last mode, like grinding through it eventually. But $30 is pretty much the limit. Now if you go in and you go with that grinding mindset and you want to do every single challenge and perfect, get 100% on every mode and find all of the studies and all that stuff, it's definitely worth that $40. You will get your time played out of it. So at that, I'd probably put the game at like the $40 price point. I'd probably put the game around a 5, right? But that's not my score. It's not what I paid for it. That's just a warning for those who are on PlayStation or did pay for it or don't have Game Pass for some reason. Now, I know my channel at this point is pretty much just an ad for fucking Game Pass, but it's a steal, all right? Through Game Pass, which I say this every review, depending on how you want to look at it, it's $15 for Ultimate, $5 for regular Game Pass, or if you have the deal, $1, or the way I look at it, it's free because you already own it. So this game is free. As a free game, this is exceptionally high value, right? I mean, it looks great, it plays great. I don't think I ran into any bugs that I can think of while playing. And it does something that I didn't touch on in the main section of the video, something that's relatively really hard to do, especially in these types of games. So typically, you have your stealth sections when you're not detected, right? And then your sections where there's just, you got zombies chasing you and the whole horde's coming after you. And the game either does one or the other really well. Look at World War Z. The whole panic with hordes of zombies coming at you is done really well, but pretty much the rest of the game is just average. Now, Back 4 Blood, we won't talk about that one, but this game does it really well. There's a whole, array of stealth takedowns and different routes you can take and wall bang options and gadgets to stealthily get through every section. And then when shit goes absolutely balls to the walls, you have all of the operator gadgets and abilities you need to go ahead and take out all of the enemies that way as well. So it really lets you play either way, and obviously it's more fun with the more people you have. Now, that all being said, my final score for this game does rely on that Game Pass subscription, it being practically free to play, okay? So overall, I would give this game a 7 out of 10. right? That's good. It's not great. It doesn't do anything too unique, but it does enough to separate it from everything else in the zombie shooter genre, right? It's more fun than Back 4 Blood and World War Z and all these other types of games where you just kind of are swarmed by waves of enemies or have to go through these types of zones and complete missions to get to an extraction point. And it does its unique things with the operators and having the ability of destruction with the Rainbow Six Siege franchise and losing your operators and all of that stuff, having to go get them back and rescue them. That all works great. But that being said, the whole progression thing where they try to stretch out the runtime of the game, and I understand why they do it. Those people that paid $40, for the game, they don't want that 8 to 11 runtime that's just not long enough. But for most people who got this through Game Pass, or at least I hope you would be getting this through Game Pass, that padded runtime just hurts the game overall. But that's just my opinion. You guys let me know what you think of the game down in the comments below, if you've played it, if you haven't played it, and specifically if you've played it and haven't played Rainbow Six Siege, because I think that's kind of an interesting audience. Those people who, don't have any sort of draw to the game or hatred towards the game because of previous franchise entries can really just say what they think about this game in particular. But hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you on the next one.